Hey guys! How are all of you beautiful people doing? I hope you all are having a great day. And yes, this is the next part of I Became Shikamaru Nara, where the world that once seemed fictional is now real. Shinobi, chakra. It's all so close. After being reborn in the body of a deceased child, the hero has a second chance to live this life anew. Having found a new home and clan, he will have a long and difficult journey. But the object that was found in the past and changed his fate is still with him. Now, with this power, he will follow the path of the strongest Shinobi. So without any delay, let's start the series. Days flew by one after another, and in the blink of an eye several months passed. For Shikamaru, this time was filled with training and learning new techniques. Being a student of the Hokage himself proved to be very useful, even though the old man did not devote much time to the guy. In fact, Shikamaru did not see the Hokage more than a few times a week. Raizeenn was quite busy and was rarely able to check on Shikamaru's progress or help him master the techniques. But, such times were still, though not often. The rest of the time, Shikamaru read various scrolls and studied knowledge in the archive that was inaccessible to ordinary genin. After all, now, one of his duties was sorting through the mountains of documents, most of which were completely uninteresting reports. It's a pity that the guy didn't manage to get access to the secret scrolls. It upset him a little. Although, if he tried, there was a chance to read them. Naruto somehow succeeded. Shikamaru was still wondering how he was able to bypass the anew. But, even with all this, the guy was able to learn a lot, and working with the help of shadow clones can easily facilitate all the work. Lately, Shikamaru only relied on them. True, unlike the same Naruto, such huge reserves were not available to the guy, even though he had Uzumaki's ancestry. Of course, the guy's current chakra reserve even surpasses the Knin and is quite close to the level of the Jonin, but he is definitely still far from the Baijua carrier. Mostly the days passed quickly. After learning a few more techniques and celebrating his birthday, Shikamaru returned to the restaurant business. Now he could afford a couple of clones, and that helped a lot. Shikamaru was ready to expand, but he was visibly annoyed by the supply problems. Although the situation in the Land of Fire was stable, robbers still existed in the face of ordinary people. Since the village itself, in fact, does not produce products, it was necessary to receive goods from other places, from other villages. True, a couple of times, the caravans were robbed, which of course was problematic. Losses are always frustrating, so Shikamaru seriously considered hiring genin to keep the transport safe. Basically, many of those who run their businesses in the villages did so. It's also good that the apostates were not interested in disrupting such cases. There is no money to protect against them. Tasks of at least B rank are an expensive pleasure for ordinary merchants. Dealing with the next report, Shikamaru exhaled a long breath and lit a cigarette. The guy was sitting in a small office, not particularly decorated, but not empty either. The office had a wide writing desk, lined with papers, as well as several scrolls and an ashtray heavily filled with ash and cigarette butts. There was a bookcase not far from the table and a couple of paintings hung on the wall. Shikamaru himself was seated on an easy chair. Throwing his legs on the table and exhaling smoke, the guy said with displeasure, "I don't like it, that bastard Gato is creating a lot of problems. Too much, he inflates the interest on the maritime trade. First, the ship from the country of honey was robbed, and now the tax is too high. This bastard is playing with death. Since the supplier in the country of tea turned out well, this will expand the range." Exhaling smoke, Shikamaru chuckled, never I would have thought that I would be the news of such things. Although, I must confess, the risks are quite big. Recently, Shikamaru began to trade not only for his restaurant, but also to expand the village's market. It has proven to be profitable and generate significant income. It's just that, again, this is a risky business and you can notably burn out because of the types like Gato. The vacuum of power of countries and hidden villages affects completely. Yes, and being a 6-year-old kid of a deal to conclude that hemorrhoids. Fortunately, he was a Shinobi and the transformation technique solved many troubles. Okay, it's time to get out of this kennel. I wanted to talk to Guy today. It seems like he finally returned from the assignment. Spreading the papers in their places, Shikamaru got up and slowly left the office. After walking along a not very long corridor, the guy went into the kitchen, where a couple of his clones and an inconspicuous old chef worked. With a curt nod to him, Shikamaru walked out into the main hall, filled with nearly a dozen people. The premises of the restaurant were quite large, 10 tables and seats for almost 30 people. Lots of dishes and a rich menu. In addition, prices did not bite, and the product itself was a complete novelty not only for the village of the Hidden Leaf, but in general for the whole world. Shikamaru has tried a lot in the past, and bringing it over here was a smart decision, and a very simple one too. After all, cooking does not require the knowledge of an engineer or something else like that. Unfortunately, he could not bear much, as he simply did not know the ingredients. The same was true for many technologies. Of course, in some things he was sure, just now was not the time for that. With the pleasant ringing of a bell, Shikamaru left the restaurant and walked out onto the busy Konoha street. The restaurant was located near the center of the village, so it was always very crowded. Since Shikamaru wanted to meet Might Guy, there was only one way, to attend his training. This weird guy trains constantly and is often very tough. Only sometimes he goes out, either on assignments, or on another argument with Kakashi. But even then everything ends with training. Shikamaru has seen these two in his restaurant more than once and often everything ends the same. Of course, only if Guy himself loses. He loves to give himself terrible punishments for losing. Although, Shikamaru usually admired his spirit and his seriousness in training. He himself loved to practice, just not to such an extent. He also observed the measure. He has already gone overboard with weights once, so he is more sensible about it now. Yesterday Shikamaru saw Guy at the Hokage's residence after he completed an A-rank task, so now, he must be at home. Therefore, without much haste, Shikamaru quickly reached the right place. Stopping outside a large house with a wide patio and a small dojo nearby, Shikamaru immediately knocked on the door. Guy's house was quite ordinary for the village of List, and he was on the outskirts of the village. True, this only made it better. The fresh air and quietness were very helpful in training. Shikamaru knew this firsthand. Not answering. Maybe he is training, although who knows. After knocking again, Shikamaru involuntarily remembered training with Avi. More precisely, the last workout. At that time, the girl was calm as usual, or rather, she tried to be like that. Still, Shikamaru can piss off her. But at the same time, she was noticeably softer and really tried to help. True, by that time, it was not so important. Shikamaru had mastered Taijutsu well and was quite tolerable with her in battle. Now, remembering this beautiful blonde, the guy involuntarily smiled. She's probably on a mission now. I think we should meet her sometime. Well, yesterday I promised Ino to help with throwing kunai, so this is a good chance. That time she left pretty quickly, and I didn't even have time to say thank you. About to knock again, Shikamaru suddenly stopped, catching a familiar sound out of the corner of his ear. Someone ran, and rather quickly. After a couple of seconds, a click was heard from the back of the door, and the door was opened by a tall man in green overalls and orange-striped stockings. Might guy, he was dressed as he always was, only without his knin vest. Thick eyebrows and a potty hairdo, and of course his famous bright smile. Guy had not even had time to see who was in front of him, when he smiled contentedly and greeted. Well. Hi Guy. Are you lost or are you to me? I'm Guy-sensei to see you, I wanted to fight. Shikamaru clenched his fist and bowed slightly. Oh. The man widened his eyes in surprise and looked appraisingly at Shikamaru. I see, you are not so easy. Where did you buy the waiting materials? If that old swindler from the Aburam quarter, then throw them away before it's too late, the man thought again, stroking his chin. Wait. You said fight. Well, yes. They say you are the strongest taijutsu master in the village, even the teacher speaks well of you. So I wanted to show you my ability and get your Guy-sensei assessment. As soon as it came to taijutsu, Guy's eyes immediately sparkled, after which he took a couple of quick steps towards Shikamaru and said loudly, hitting his chest. You came to the right place Guy. This legendary Konoha green beast is the consummate master of taijutsu. Then Guy slightly lowered his sparkling gaze and asked. By the way, who told you about me, what kind of teacher? And in general, what is your name? Where are you from? Of course, the young man was not particularly surprised at such a strange behavior, but still Might Guy was indeed an unusual person. Shikamaru sighed a little and replied with a smile. I am Shikamaru Nara, and my teacher. But the guy did not have time to finish, he was immediately interrupted. Nara. Are you Shikaku's son? Well, yes. I see. As if sorting out something in his memory, the man often nodded, and then finally asked. Well, so what did you want? Well, I already said, I wanted. Exactly. You wanted to fight. Guy laughed and waving his hand quickly began to walk into the house. Let's go. Shikamaru looked at Guy's trail and mumbled with a shake of his head. Actually, I wanted to. Well, okay. Then he mentally added, he is really quite eccentric, but it's even funny. The third old man usually resembles a strictly instructor, and Avi was generally constantly silent and only made displeased faces. Father has been on a mission with Uncle Chowsy for 2 months already, at least some variety. Sliding the door behind him, Shikamaru quickly followed Guy, looking at the decoration of the house along the way. But there was nothing special here. At least the guy was expecting something unusual, but as it turned out in vain. Guy apparently kept an eye on the cleanliness, so the apartment was very well maintained. Passing a small kitchen, the two quickly went out into the backyard and already there Shikamaru had an amazing view. Completely trampled solid ground, as well as dozens of dumbbells, barbells, weights and a bunch of different iron for training. In principle, he was already expecting something like this. Having passed through a couple of wooden dummies, Renjiang, with obvious chips and cracks, Guy went further to the free area without stopping. There was already a dojo very close and probably it also belonged to this master of taijutsu. But they did not go there and simply stopped at a free meadow, where there was also almost no grass. It resembled the most common training ground for Shinobi, which Shikamaru had seen a lot. Stopping here, Guy turned around and said with the same bright smile. I saw your hands and your eyes, you definitely know a lot about good training. Well, I'm definitely far from you, mentally grinning, Shikamaru nodded shortly. I train in taijutsu quite often. I also like ninjutsu, but Tai has his own special charm. Ha ha ha, I agree with that. Guy smiled broadly and asked. Okay, you like talking about sparring. Well, actually, I wanted to show you my skills and hoped for a couple of tips. Guy gave Shikamaru an appraising glance, and then abruptly took off. The guy immediately reacted, yet the speed of the man was not so fast. It wasn't hard to see that this was just a test. It would have been very difficult for a simple genin, but Shikamaru had long ago surpassed such a level, so, leaving the trajectory of the blow, the guy struck with his fist towards Might Guy. The man smiled with satisfaction and simply took the guy's blow to the side with his palm and instantly moved behind Shikamaru. This time the guy didn't even have time to understand anything, as Guy's palm was already near his neck. Chuckling a little, Shikamaru shook his head. I give up. Guy laughed and patted the guy on the shoulder. Very good, Guy, your reaction is impressive, and the power of the blow is very decent. I think, without weights, you can show even better results. Are you wearing about 50 kilograms? Shikamaru blinked in shock and then quickly nodded. Yes. 53, to be precise, is my limit with which I can handle loads without consequences. Guy nodded contentedly. Yes, that's good. How old are you? 6. Guy's face changed and his torso tilted in amazement. He stared into Shikamaru's face. Are you kidding me, right? 6 years. Then the man stood up abruptly and muttered. Although it seems like Shikaku had a son somewhere at that time. Well, the children went. Returning his gaze to Shikamaru again, Guy sighed and patted the guy on the shoulder. Yes, you are very talented. Perhaps only one friend of mine was capable of something like that at your age. Shikamaru raised his eyebrows in question. Are you talking about Kakashi Hatake, your eternal rival? Yeah. In the end, how could my opponent have done worse? Wait. Guy narrowed his eyes slightly and asked. How do you know about my eternal rival, boy? Well, who doesn't know about it? Shikamaru made a confused expression and said, I think everyone in the village knows. Ha, you are probably right. Well, you should know that I am winning now. After all, our score is already 36-35, and in my favor. Shikamaru nodded and then asked. Happen Guy-san, can you ask a question? Yes, of course, ask whatever you want. Young generation interested in taijutsu, how can I refuse? The power of youth burns in each of us. I just have to support young ninja. Who if not me? Shikamaru smiled and immediately asked. It concerns one legendary technique. 8 heavenly gates. When Guy heard Shikamaru's words, he immediately changed his face and asked in surprise. 8 gates. How do you know about them? Well. The guy thought a little, and then replied. I learned about the legendary master of taijutsu who used the 8 heavenly gate and was able to defeat several very strong shinobi. I was impressed, and when I found out his name. In general, this was your father Guy-san, and I would like to learn this amazing technique. Guy froze slightly and immediately noticed the guy's serious look. His father's story was not new to the village. It's just that few people really knew about her. But when this guy called his father a legendary master of taijutsu, Guy's soul slightly warmed and the man shed a little tear. But Guy quickly pulled himself together and, brushing away the tears, seriously said, "I understood what you mean. But you must know, the 8 Heavenly Gate is a very difficult and dangerous forbidden technique. Only a strong and trained Shinobi is able to master it." Shikamaru nodded glumly and said gravely, "I understand, Guy-sensei, that's why I came to you, hoping that you will teach me this legendary technique, if I can pass your test or somehow prove my strength." Guy surveyed the guy again and nodded slowly. "Then, let's see what you are capable of. Show me your youth power." Training with Guy dragged on. Shikamaru returned home after sunset, barely moving his legs and completely not thinking about anything. Even this was not enough strength, he just crawled home like a zombie, not making out the road. His face was his usual indifferent expression, without any emotion. All naive notions about Might Guy's hard training have been dispelled today. How wrong he was. In reality, everything turned out to be much worse than in the manga or anime, or even from the gossip of other shinobi that he managed to hear. The truth turned out to be such that Guy really does not train, but simply mocks his own body. This is a completely new form of masochism. Even masochists would shudder at this mockery. Even Shikamaru, who was accustomed to painful and exhausting workouts, was able to withstand it. For several months, planning a meeting with Guy, Shikamaru did not even doubt his strength, endurance. But, as it turned out, this was not enough. Even Raizeenn did not carry out something like that. The old man used to teach the guy how to control and use the chakra correctly, and the seals and how to use them correctly. Perhaps the old man third taught Shikamaru what he was very good at. Still, if anyone says that Raizeenn is bad in control, then these people should look at his students. All three are real monsters of the shinobi world. Okay, Tsunade with her super genes Senju and Uzumaki. And Orochimaru did a lot of experiments on himself. But what about Jiraiya? Isn't he the most ordinary person from an unknown clan? Yes, he is definitely a case where a clanless person achieves a lot, just like his student Minato, who became the 4th Hokage. Therefore, there was no reason to doubt the competence of the third, and to say that he was not a strict teacher Shikamaru simply could not. But after meeting with Guy, all those memorizing different sequences of seals without the Sharingan was even tireless, but quite interesting for himself. After all, compared to hours of similar endurance exercises from Guy, this is nothing at all. Damn, I'm dying. Just Shikamaru was about to take a step, when he suddenly stumbled on a stone. Well, Stumbling on a stone, Shikamaru flew a couple of meters, collecting all the dirt along the way. Lying face down and breathing dust, the guy unconsciously remembered these same type of exercises on his hands from Guy. Grimacing, Shikamaru began to slowly rise from the ground. Along the way, thinking, is it worth getting up at all? After all, you can rest here too. Sighing and shaking his head, Shikamaru got up heavily. Still, he did not dare to sleep somewhere in the alley. So I had to keep going. Guy probably decided to exhaust him so much that Shikamaru had only the strength to go home, let alone think about the 8 gates. Now he was definitely not up to it. Unfortunately, this is just the beginning. Might Guy had already mapped out a whole list of tests where one was worse than the other. Shikamaru had no idea what lay ahead. The path to the 8 Heavenly Gate was more difficult than it seemed. Ignoring the dirty clothes and face, Shikamaru continued to crawl home. But, this time the road to the clan was not as easy as usual. Passing through the Yamanaka quarter, Shikamaru went directly to the Nara clan, but today on the usual deserted road that evening, there was a motionless figure. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. 2 days ago, the Yamanaka clan. On this day, Ave finally returned from a long assignment from the Land of Waves. Having noticeably gained in strength over the past year, the girl tried to complete tasks of a higher rank. The clan had already told her more than once that the girl might well try to pass the Jonin exam. But this was not what Avi wanted. She wanted to directly get into the anew, the most elite and strongest Shinobi detachment in the village. This was her dream since the days of the academy, but only recently everything has changed. If not for this, then very soon, the girl would have started a new life in anew. Once, at a regular training session with Shikamaru, with a guy she really didn't like, a strange incident happened. Shikamaru decided to end everything before the agreed contract, which was quite surprising. Avi trained with him for about a week and her irritation gradually began to disappear. Still, she lost and had to admit it, and Shikamaru since then, although he behaved insolently, but not so much. Avi had even started to get serious about this workout. Previously, it was difficult for her to find someone with whom to fight and hone her skills. The girl was not very sociable and only a few people in the clan spoke to her, but she herself never insisted and did not ask anyone. Only this guy left her no choice when he won. Moreover, every time he acted without asking her opinion at all, he wanted sparring, then throwing shuriken, then ninjutsu training. This insolence annoyed Avi, but she quickly got used to it. Only now, the deal came to an end, and Shikamaru did not even show up to say about it, just sending Kji instead. Avi herself did not understand why, but it annoyed her even more than this guy's stupid taunts. Sitting in the backyard of her house, the girl looked at the slowly floating clouds and for some reason was sad. It really wasn't that bad. Maybe I offended him in some way. No, I think it's impossible to offend him at all. With a sigh, Avi shook her head and leaned back, her golden hair softly scattered over the green grass, and she immediately closed her eyes quietly. It would seem that in the past she did not even think about how important it is to have friends. She loved to spend time with Ino, since she had neither a sister nor a family. But the girl has now entered the academy and is rarely shown. Therefore, Avi now felt completely alone. Even the desire to train has disappeared, and joining the anew squad was no longer such a desired dream. I wonder how Ino is there. She probably spends a lot of time with. As soon as the girl had a smile on her face, she suddenly furrowed her brows, and why such thoughts at all? Sitting down again, the girl thought tensely. But then why don't I feel that dislike anymore? He is very strange. He looks like a child, but literally any of his actions are like an adult. Is it really that everyone in the Nara clan is like that? It's so strange. Oh, okay, I don't want to think about it anymore. Quickly shook her head, Evie stood up abruptly and tightened her kimono belt. Discarding all unnecessary thoughts, the girl began to train. She wanted to stop thinking about it, to become her past. But, just at that moment, the door leading to the backyard opened, so that Avi was distracted. Ha, elder sister. How do you? A sweet girl appeared on the threshold and immediately waved her hand. Ino smiled happily and quickly ran to Avi. Embracing her, Ino closed her eyes and purred. Finally you came back. It was so boring without you. Pulling back a little, the girl grinned and proudly said. By the way, I finally learned how to hit the target with kunai. I told you I can. Avi smiled a little and ruffled Ino's short hair a little. You are great, you are my best student. I didn't doubt you. Well, actually, I was taught this Shikamaru. He showed me a couple of tricks. Ah, he's so cool. When Ino mentioned Shikamaru, Avi chuckled a little. Yes. As for me, he is quite ordinary. And his appearance is not particularly that. Hey. Ino frowned her brows and said with displeasure. I know you don't like him, but I like it. So don't say that. Avi laughed and ruffled Ino's hair slightly. You are such a sweet girl, but does he know about it? Well. Ino hesitated slightly, and then slightly pouting muttered, he keeps leaving, and I can't even talk to him. During the breaks, he also disappears somewhere with this Kji. After we stopped spending time together, I don't often manage to talk to him. Kji said he had some kind of job at the Hokage residence. Avi was slightly surprised and asked. What kind of work? Isn't he too small for that yet? Well, I don't know. Ino shrugged. Kji loves to chat, but when I ask about Shikamaru he always gets off topic. I don't like it. I thought we became friends after everything. No wonder this guy was probably only interested in training. I doubt that he even remembered our names. For some reason, Avi turned away and continued training with a displeased face. Ino wrinkled her brow and said softly. It's not true, you yourself know he's not like that. The girl turned sharply and quickly ran away, not saying any more words. Following the rapidly retreating Ino, Avi immediately felt a slight prick of guilt. She didn't want to offend her, but for some reason everything turned out like this. I shouldn't be so. He really isn't that bad, and whatever came over me. Shaking her head, Avi decided to apologize to Ino later. Yes, and she had a desire to talk to Shikamaru, to discuss why he decided to end everything earlier and why now he also avoids Ino. Well, not that I really want to see him. Maybe at least it will cheer her up. Without noticing herself, the girl unexpectedly smiled for herself. One way or another, she simply could not admit to herself that although Shikamaru was annoying, he had already become a friend to her. So Ino only pushed her to meet him, so the girl's mood even improved. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. That evening, an unexpected meeting for Shikamaru took place in Konoha. In the shadows of the buildings, when the sun had already set over the horizon and the village was illuminated only by bright stars and the moon, in one of the Yamanaka neighborhoods, a man appeared right in the middle of the street. He immediately caught Shikamaru's attention. The atmosphere immediately became unusual, a quiet wind lifted several leaves into the air, and a lone kitten disappeared into the shadow of the block, flashing its amber eyes at last. Thus, an oppressive silence covered the silent quarter. Tired before this, Shikamaru, as soon as he saw a blurry silhouette in the distance, suddenly became serious. Not his abilities, but rather instincts made the guy wake up from fatigue and his gaze slowly focused on the dark silhouette. Shikamaru clearly felt that someone in front of him was very dangerous. When his vision cleared up, he knew for sure that he was not mistaken at all. 10 meters from him, a tall man was standing not very hidden in the shadows. Although, rather, it was already an old man. But, of course, if he were an ordinary old man, Shikamaru would not even pay attention to him. This one was very special. Shikamaru immediately recognized him. He simply could not recognize an old man with a cane, with an arm and head wrapped in bandages. The bandages covered absolutely all of his right arm and the right side of his face. His cold gaze and a noticeable scar on his chin left Shikamaru in no doubt about his identity. Shimura dance. Damn it. What an inopportune moment. Even though Shikamaru sensed danger, he didn't show it. He knew for sure that one slightest manifestation of fear would not hide from the gaze of this old man. Fear will be the first thing that makes him think. After all, Shikamaru doesn't even have to know who is in front of him. The head of the hidden organization of the route was not such a famous person. A simple 6-year-old genin should not even have heard his name, let alone his face, information about which, of course, should have been erased long ago. Of course, Shikamaru couldn't act like an innocent fool. Therefore, he wrinkled his forehead even more and asked loudly, "Who are you?" Dans did not change his face at all and calmly replied, "I am Shimura Dans, the village elder." "I see." Shikamaru nodded and fell silent. He clearly understood that Dans was not just walking around here. He's definitely here because of him. Therefore, the guy decided to get straight to the point. "Senior, you didn't just walk here." Shikamaru pulled his hands out of his pockets and calmly asked, "And what did the elder want from me?" Dan's gaze has long appreciated the guy in front of him. This was their first meeting, and although he had heard a lot of the boys about it, he was still slightly surprised. He's holding up pretty well, indeed the talent of the Nara clan. Dans wondered not at the many abrasions indicating hard training, but at Shikamaru's behavior. The Shinobi's strength is naturally important, but he had no doubts about Shikamaru's strength. It was also very important for the Shinobi to control themselves and not show true emotions. This boy coped well with this. And this despite the fact that he was only 6 years old. A really special case. Dans couldn't read it, but he still noticed some nervousness on the guy's face. But, it was natural. Dan's face and aura always influenced everyone in this way. Few could remain calm when someone is so serious in front of you, assessing you with an icy gaze like an instrument. Shikamaru understood that the old man had a share in Gan, so he was on guard. But, naturally, he did not even try to interact with the chakra. Not only was he too tired now, but he was simply powerless to do something. Now he was like a rabbit caught by a lion and escape is impossible. Quiet dark alley, what better place to kill? Naturally, Dans was not going to kill Shikamaru, moreover, he would rather protect him from the assassins. That is why he is here today. When Shikamaru asked his expected question, Dans answered without hesitation. "I came to talk to you about your abilities. You may not know, but I am no ordinary elder. In the villages, I am responsible for the hidden security of the entire village. And you so simply tell me about it." Naturally. Dan slightly lifted the corner of his lips. "Sooner or later you will become a village jonin, you will somehow learn about root. Even some knin are aware of this. It's not such a secret. Although, in the library in which you spend a lot of time about this, of course, there is nothing. He even knows where I've been." "Well, that's natural." Without focusing on this, Shikamaru asked. "Then, what do I have to do with this? I'm just a simple student of the academy." When Shikamaru asked another question, Dans lightly hit the ground with his cane and replied. "Do not belittle your abilities. I already know that you received Genin's protector. The fact that you stayed in the academy is also clear to me. You have unique abilities, so it was natural that I had to meet with you and propose to you." Shikamaru frowned warily and continued to listen in silence. Judging by the old man's words, he knows a thing or two about his powers. At the same moment, Dans began to slowly move forward towards the guy. Although Raizeenn is trying to hide a lot about you, he could not hide something. Stopping a couple of meters from Shikamaru, Danza let go of the cane and slowly began to get something out of his bosom. The cane stood motionless, as if it had been nailed to the ground. This trick didn't surprise Shikamaru, he was much more interested in slowly pulling Danza out of his clothes. As soon as Shikamaru saw this object, he could not resist mentally cursing. Damn! This is a bauble. Danza took out a small bone. These are the bones that Shikamaru often used during training. Most often, he buried them, but it seems that it did not help and Danza somehow managed to get one, or maybe more. It was not always possible to calculate how many bones were lost. So the loss of one or two was expected. I suppose it's yours. The old man held out his palm with a small bone towards Shikamaru. The distal phalanx of the index finger. It looks like you dropped. Shikamaru just grinned wryly and accepted the bone. So you guessed it, it looks like I was not careful. You're right, hiding your gift might have been somewhat stupid, but that also made sense. But, in the village, my eyes and ears are enough. It was a matter of time before I found out about you and your gift. Putting the bone back in his pocket, Shikamaru asked gloomily. Now what? Nothing. Danza put his hand back on the cane and said calmly as well, Shikatsumiyaku is a rarity, even for the Kaguya clan who are able to get it. Therefore, I have come to invite you to the route. With your wits and abilities, I am confident that you will become a very strong shinobi of the village, and I have a lot of experience in training strong shinobi. Soon there will be a standard set of clan ninjas in the route and a candidate should also come from your clan. It may well be that you will turn out to be one. Can I refuse? Shikamaru raised an eyebrow inquiringly. The old man came to him personally, it was very unusual. Danza nodded briefly. Naturally, Raizeenn is watching over you, so I can't just pick you up. I just have to warn you, boy. If you strive for power, then in the route you belong. If you want knowledge, there is much more of it in the route than in the Hokage archive. He won't give you what I could, so you should. And it was at this moment that a hoarse voice was heard from the side. I think he should go home. It's getting late. Shikamaru and Danza instantly turned their heads towards the voice. 10 meters off to the side, a silhouette stood in the shadows. As soon as they both turned towards him, the man stepped out of the shadows. Shikamaru already knew who it was, he simply could not confuse his voice, and Danza probably also immediately understood everything, because only Raizeenn could make this elder grimace like that. Raizeenn. Danza nodded slightly to the Hokage who came out into the moonlight. The third himself smiled a little in response. Danza. And I was still waiting for you to come to the boy. Didn't your people tell you that you shouldn't keep an eye on him? The situation immediately became quite tense, causing Shikamaru to grimace slightly. Raizeenn looked so friendly that it didn't even fit the situation, but Danza was the opposite. The arrival of the Hokage seemed to upset him a little. You know, I could not lose sight of such a talent. Yes, and you yourself understand that someone like him will be much better and safer en route. His abilities are unique and developing them is an important task of the village. I agree. Raizeenn nodded slightly. But I think Shikamaru will make his own choice, without our help. Danza chuckled and nodded briefly at Raizeenn, took one last look at Shikamaru and slowly began to walk away. The old man still had thoughts in his head. Although Raizeenn said about the choice of Shikamaru, he himself had already managed to stretch out his hands to him. Now Danza had little chance of recruiting the guy, he already understood this when he came here. Therefore, after walking a couple of meters, Danzo turned his head slightly and said seriously, "Shikamaru Nara is a genius, but remember, if you use your powers against the village, it will end badly for you. The root is always watching." Having finished with his warnings, which looked a little like a threat, Danzo immediately disappeared without a trace, leaving behind several leaves floating in the wind. Shikamaru immediately breathed out a sigh of relief. In a past life, he was hardened in difficulties, but even so, this old man made him notably nervous. Although, his threat to Shikamaru amused a little. Moving his gaze to the Hokage, he immediately smiled. Not taking his words to heart, Danzo is a little, well, let's just say, he is trying for the good of the village, albeit with his own methods. As for the rest, we will discuss this later, the time is already late. Shikamaru involuntarily grinned at these words. Either Raizeenn was really blind, or he was too soft-hearted. For the leader, both of these qualities, albeit separately, were the worst drawbacks. Of course, in his smile, Shikamaru showed no true emotion. Still, Raizeenn had good sides, and the fight against Danzo and his eradication was not an easy task. Not to mention the old friendship of these two, Raizeenn has neglected this weed too much, now it cannot be pulled out without harm to the tree. Therefore, all that Raizeenn could now was to live in the same village with Danzo. For Shikamaru, accustomed to uprooting weeds, such a look was a failure, but he is not a teacher for the old man. It would be silly and pointless. All he could do now was keep learning and building strength. Whatever the world is, power always decides everything. The Shinobi world is no exception. After saying goodbye to the Hokage, Shikamaru was finally able to safely return home. After listening to another reprimand from his mother about his long walks, the guy had dinner and went to bed. As soon as he touched the pillow, Shikamaru immediately fell asleep. This difficult day was finally over. At the same time, in a hidden part of the Leaf Village, Raizeenn Sarutabi's approach to village rule was truly unusual. Even after Danzo's assassination attempt on him, he not only received no punishment, but even Root was not disbanded. Of course, the elder was not surprised, it was quite in the spirit of Raizeenn. Another annoying trait. Now Danzo was really surprised, it turned out that he seriously decided to look after the boy, which definitely complicated everything. He did not think that after such a failure with Orochimaru, the third would even dare to teach someone. Entering the huge dark hall, Danzo calmly walked across the long wooden bridge. The sound of his footsteps and the sound of his cane echoed in all directions, bouncing off the walls. It was the most familiar sound in this place. Usually only Danzo would break the silence without worrying about anything. Any member of the anew root acted as quietly and inconspicuously as possible. This was one of the important rules of the organization. When Danzo walked all the way to the end of the bridge, he opened the large gate and walked slowly inside. Directly beyond this gate was another huge corridor, with dozens of numbered doors. At the end of the corridor was a small, unmarked door that Danzo was heading to. Entering the familiar study, the old man immediately settled down at a large table, on an easy chair. This writing desk was located in the middle of a spacious and empty room. All there was a single cabinet filled with scrolls and a human-sized statue with a hairless head and completely flat features. It would seem that this is an ordinary sculpture, but in fact, it had some unique features. A huge number of fuin seals all over the body of the statue were even faintly expressed, but still noticeable. She was a very important subject for Danzo. The old man's desk was neatly furnished. On one side were a few scrolls, on the other a pair of inkwells, and in the middle a small pile of parchment. As soon as the old man sat down at the table, at the same instant a flash flashed in front of him and a tall masked girl appeared in front of Danza. This mask had several markings and a small cut in the eyes. In shape, it resembled a wolf's face, and all that could be seen behind it were two bright purple eyes. The girl also had two blades behind her back and roots standard Shinobi clothes, which were difficult to distinguish due to the dark cloak that covered almost the entire body, even covering the girl's grey hair. As soon as she appeared, Danz unrolled one of the scrolls on the edge of the table and calmly said, "Euro, did you manage to find out something?" The girl, without getting up from her knee and without raising her head, answered in a calm tone. "No." Orochimaru completely covered his tracks. "All we could find was a couple of scrolls with calculations. Even the equipment has completely disappeared." It's clear." The old man nodded slightly. He knows his business. After his words, Danza paused for a long time, examining the scroll. After about a minute, he spoke again. "Okay. All this is expected." Putting aside the scroll, Danz frowned slightly. "Euro, order the 6th squad to start spying on Uchiha Shisui. They are the only ones with the greatest chance of being overlooked. But let them also be careful. This ninja can be even more dangerous than before. As for your task," a little thoughtful, the old man nodded. "Go to Kiri and find the Kaguya clan. In recent years they often change their location. But they never leave the territory of the Land of the Mist. Try to find an instance of one of their representatives, preferably with an improved Shikatsumiyaku genome. Of course, it will be almost impossible. If everything goes like this, then just get one of their people. Find out all the information you can, and then bring him to me. Try to choose someone who is helpful and knowledgeable, like an elder, and keep his mind intact. If you can't pry something out, Sun can handle it here. Although, you can take it with you in case." "Got it." The girl nodded briefly and stood up. Just at that moment Danz added, "And yet, take Shinra away from watching Shikamaru. Now there is no need for that." "Got it." With another shake of her head, the woman named Euro immediately disappeared, leaving Danza in quiet solitude. The old man immediately returned with a frown to the table and took another scroll, of which there were many more. The reports had accumulated enough, so Danza began to familiarize himself. Shikamaru's situation had changed, so he decided not to get involved in it for now. It was clear to him that it was almost impossible to take a guy to the route. Unfolding the scroll, Danz muttered in displeasure. "Jinchuriki." Continuing to read the scroll, Danz remained in his office for many more hours. The next day, Shikamaru got up early as usual, and quickly sorted out breakfast, washing, and training. After finishing here and creating a couple of clones, the guy sent them to a restaurant, and he went to the Hokage's residence. He wanted to teach a little technique, and also discuss with the Hokage a problem called Danz. There was no time for that yesterday. Yes, what a wonderful day. Calmly walking around his block, Shikamaru enjoyed the fresh air and light cloudy breeze. It was going to rain, which was not very often for Konoha. But the guy's favorite weather was similar. So it was no surprise that his mood was even better than usual. And the morning workout gave him a lot of energy. Shikamaru had planned to use several clones for training today, so the day was expected to be wonderful. Just as Shikamaru turned his eyes back to the road, his gaze caught someone he knew. A short, fair-haired boy was walking slowly in his direction. Shikamaru instantly recognized this blonde with the unusual stripes in the mustache video. Naruto was already very noticeable. Although, people passing by him threw not very welcoming glances at the boy. But, Naruto seemed used to not seeing them, so he lowered his head and walked slowly towards Shikamaru. Shikamaru immediately grinned and headed off to meet Naruto, remembering their recent meeting along the way. About 4 months ago, Shikamaru held another training session, as he always did. But, this time something was different. The guy was a little late due to some trouble with G. The fat man caught a bit of a cold, so Shikamaru went to training alone this time after visiting a friend and bringing him some medicinal herbs. What was a little overkill, Kji's mother had taken care of everything for a long time. In general, having finished for lunch, Shikamaru decided to go to an unfamiliar training ground and mark shurikens there. It just so happened that it was there that he met the famous Naruto Uzumaki. Although, so far not particularly famous. True, Shikamaru did not care, he was already glad of this meeting. When the guy approached the training ground and exhaled with relief, his gaze unconsciously slid to the side, where he immediately noticed a lonely guy. That's... Noticing the blonde hair, Shikamaru immediately became suspicious. It was not often in the villages that one could meet people with such hair. But, while it was too early to draw conclusions, so Shikamaru decided to make sure for sure. At the same time, Naruto was beating a large stump wrapped in rice straw. Surprisingly, there weren't usually very many of them in the village. More often than not, Shinobi simply practiced strikes on trees or living targets. Well, and in rare cases it was stones or something harder. Thanks to chakra and physical energy, the ninjas' bodies were noticeably different, so that they were able to literally break trees and stones with their feet. Only Naruto was not strong enough to break rocks yet. It was just an ordinary little boy, with quite the usual force of impact. In general, Shikamaru himself had such a simulator at home, though a little smaller. Although, the straw was no longer there, and the tree itself was in a sad state. Slowly approaching Naruto, Shikamaru became even more convinced that he was right. The voice was very much like the voice of that same nine-tailed Jinchuriki that he had once heard in his past world. The guy beat the stump and sometimes counted the blows while commenting on his actions. Get it? And more. The hard thuds from the blows were barely audible, but even so, Shikamaru could draw some conclusions. Naruto's blow was quite okay, for a child. Stopping a meter away from the blonde, Shikamaru smiled and shouted. Take it below. Naruto suddenly stopped and lowered his raised leg to strike, and then slowly turned around. What? You, who are you? I am Shikamaru, Shikamaru Nara. The guy calmly walked to the stump and knocked on the straw a couple of times. Not bad. I've already forgotten what it feels like. You should hit lower. With your height you are unlikely to hit an adult's head, so it is better to aim at the liver, well, or a little lower. And aiming at the head is actually not always wise. Believe me, I learned this from painful experience. Grinning, Shikamaru asked. What is your name? Naruto's face changed noticeably. It seemed to him it was very surprising that someone just spoke to him, and did not express the standard hatred like the rest of the inhabitants. Shikamaru looked like a pretty cheerful and open guy. He directly disposed others to communicate with him. I am Naruto Uzumaki, the guy replied rather uncertainly, not at all what Shikamaru had expected. Apparently, he also met that Naruto, who had not yet begun to fight oppression, but was the most ordinary incomprehensible child. If so, then it was even a little dangerous. One wrong word or action could somehow affect the worldview of the young Uzumaki. It seems like the third at one time influenced the boy's desire to become Hokage. Shikamaru was not averse to acquiring such a valuable ally, but who knows how this communication will affect the guy. Well, I think it shouldn't be worse if I exchange a few words with him. In general, Shikamaru had planned this meeting from the very beginning. He just didn't think it would happen so soon. It was quite unexpected that Naruto would start training on his own at this age. Shikamaru didn't want everything to come out nice and kind, but rather hoped it would turn into something unpleasant, like an argument or a fight. The rivalry raises the spirit and gives motivation to grow further, so Shikamaru had his own thoughts on this. Since the guy had not yet become a bully, smearing paint on the face of the third, it was possible to cheer him up a little. Taking a look at one task on the list, Shikamaru could only chuckle. It looks like this option is the only one. Demon Fox. Unlike other tasks, this one had as many as 3 ways to accomplish. 1. Support Naruto Uzumaki. 2. Ignore. 3. Do harm. Since there could be no speech about support, since support can affect the character of the guy, which can result not in the Naruto who tried to prove to everyone that they were wrong, but rather in Naruto, who would have a friend whose opinion to him may be more important. Such an early recognition can drastically affect the future. If this happens, then Shikamaru can undoubtedly acquire not just an ally, but someone else more loyal, but for him it was already superfluous. He didn't really want to observe the canon, only the canon situation can be useful. Naruto's influence on Sasuke can create a lot of interesting situations, like Sasuke leaving Konoha or something else. And the situation with the tailed beasts is also interesting. Well, ignoring the boy was already impossible, so there was only one thing left. Just what Shikamaru was sure of from the start. As much as he wanted, it all came down to this option. Although the reward was not bad, the elixir of muscle strengthening is a worthy reward for such a simple deed. But Shikamaru had doubts about how to harm Naruto. When the boy introduced himself, Shikamaru thought things over quickly, so he immediately nodded. Nice to meet you, Naruto, you hit quite well. How about fist swinging? By the way, I know a thing or two about Taijutsu. I can show you a couple of tricks. Naruto nodded without thinking, to which Shikamaru grinned and stood up. Blame the guy, but you are guaranteed a couple of bruises. When Naruto took a stance, Shikamaru immediately jumped from his place. He moved at a fairly normal speed, so that even Naruto could keep up with her. Except, the guy definitely didn't know anything about Taijutsu at all. It was immediately apparent that he had never fought. He couldn't even stand up properly, probably all he could do was just practice the punches. Therefore, it was not difficult to understand the result of this easy confrontation. When Shikamaru approached the young Jinchuriki, he didn't even have time to react as the opponent's fist landed right in his stomach. Naruto immediately doubled over like a match and flew off a meter, falling on his side, starting to cough loudly. Shikamaru stopped and smiled apologetically. It was a little unpleasant to beat children, and even those who were completely lacking in combat skills. Although the blow was terribly weak, it was still enough for a simple boy. But, it was necessary. The guy could come in handy for the passage through the barrier or something. So this beginning was only the first step. And Shikamaru Naruto didn't really like it either. Maybe his fate was difficult, but there were people in the world with a worse fate. Sure, Naruto was not recognized and hated, but was it really that hard for him? He had lodging, food, and was probably also protected by the third Hokage. Besides, has he ever been severely punished for all his misdeeds? The guy was always protected, there is no doubt about that. Plus, he had very good genetics from both parents. And of course, the Baijua within himself, which helped him to increase his chakra reserves. Therefore, to say that his life was so terrible is a greatly exaggerated opinion. Sad moments with a lonely guy on a swing made me cry, but it's worth looking at things intelligently. Naruto lives quite well. Definitely, in some things Shikamaru understood him. Gnawing scraps in the trash and fighting for food is such an experience. Contempt and hatred in people's views. Easy. In the past world, Shikamaru was like that at every step. All in all, Naruto is the perfect protagonist, not particularly smart, but with super genetics. It's funny, but this was often not emphasized in anime, but on the contrary, they talked about the guy as a loser, as if he was the most unlucky and generally a weakling incapable of anything. An interesting loser with the genes of Uzumaki, the father of the Kage, the Baijua and the genius teacher, albeit a pervert. This is not to mention the fact that he was chosen by fate and is the reincarnation of Ashura, a direct descendant of the Sage of the Six Paths, who in turn descended from an even stronger monster. In addition, Shikamaru also did not forget how Naruto promised to establish peace and end wars. But what is the bottom line? He never fulfilled Jiraiya's dream. The Shinobi system, as it was, remains the same. Curious if this was the system he defended in that battle with Kaguya. The very system that led to this circle of hate. Naruto's main problem is his inability to assess things soberly. After all, he simply did not even know how to establish peace, but could only talk about it. All this nonsense about friendship, love, understanding is just nonsense. In a world where there is a winner and a loser, there will be both love and hate, because this is normal. It's not okay to always kill each other. The desire to become an authoritarian leader only in words sounds proud and dignified. He wanted to change the world, but he was simply unable to do so. Because of the very complexes revealed on Turtle Island, Naruto aspired to this post. He strove for this recognition. After all, somewhere inside, he is still insecure and weak boy, sparing recognition. And when he became a Kage, what was the result? Naruto just stopped developing, as if he had reached the end of his life. He was attached to the Hokage chair and slowly grew old. And did he develop at all? From the very first chapter of this story, the kid is still the same. He did not grow out of himself at all and still yelled at every corner about his dream. Undoubtedly, the boy also has positive sides, but there is simply no sense in them in the real and cruel world of Shinobi. More precisely, these positive features of him did not in any way make him, chosen by fate, able to establish peace in the whole world. Naruto has gained strength, but without brains you cannot build a world without wars. Peaceful people cannot be seen without cruelty and composure. Hashirama is clear proof of this. It just so happened that the views of Sasuke with his revolution for Shikamaru were much closer and looked much more real. The guy left the village and tried to achieve his goal, lived on his own and went only forward. Yes, his youthful maximalism could be annoying, but isn't that normal for a young guy? How else could a teenager at the age of 12 or 13 behave with such and such a childhood trauma? In the anime, Sasuke was a very lively and elaborate character, and those who called him a hysterical change of mind are just a bunch of fools. It is completely normal to change your views, it is abnormal to be an undeveloped break, fixated on one thing and shouting stupidity at every corner, not to mention belief in crazy things. Naruto did not develop, but Sasuke has grown out of his past more than once. Regarding the revolution, the one that was supposed to bring peace to the whole world, it was really an option that could affect something. Just what Naruto the Chosen One was simply unable to do. That is why the world ultimately remained the same, with the same system. Indeed, without the determination and those traits that Sasuke possessed, it was impossible to carry out this revolution. Sasuke did indeed offer a sensible method to overthrow the policy of the hidden villages that had caused so many deaths, so many of his loved ones. Perhaps this is exactly what Naruto had never understood. Something I got off topic again. That's how usual. Although, remembering all those names on the tombstones, I am more and more aware that something needs to be done, otherwise everything will be even worse. What a trump card. Yet he not only expected to complete the task, it was even more important to do business. Approaching the already more or less normal guy, Shikamaru shook his head in disappointment. You are weak, Naruto. Your parents would definitely be unhappy with these successes. The guy immediately grimaced, and after a moment looked up in amazement. Do you know my parents? Oh. Shikamaru arched an eyebrow in surprise. Don't you know? As expected, Naruto immediately recovered and quickly ran to Shikamaru with questions. Tell me, who are they? What were their names? How do you know them? Shikamaru frowned in annoyance and patted Naruto hard on the shoulder. Calm down. Have you been told that you are too chatty? I'm sorry. We didn't say. Shikamaru immediately sighed apologetically. Well, yes, you don't talk to many people. Listen. Meeting the blonde's eyes, Shikamaru quickly looked around and then said gravely. I know enough about your parents and why everyone is treating you like that. But remember, if I tell you anything, you will never even think about it out loud. Our conversation is a secret that no one should know about, not your closest friends if they suddenly appear with you, not even the third Hokage himself. Am I clear? Naruto nodded quickly. Yes. Swear. Naruto nodded seriously without thinking twice. I swear. Well, yes, I hope. Mentally Shikamaru has already decided everything, even without these vows. Still, he needed Naruto, so the vow was just for the sake of seriousness. But, in general, it was not bad. Nevertheless, you never know what there will ruffle Naruto. Certainly not many know about the son of the fourth and about Kushin. Therefore, Shikamaru should be more careful. But, Naruto may have been small, he could get the very minimum of information. At least Shikamaru could throw in completely simple information and interest Naruto in this, and only then do something bigger. Okay, I won't reveal everything at once. There are things you shouldn't know about yet. But this does not mean that I will be silent. Let's start with a simple one. Glancing around the area, Shikamaru nodded in satisfaction. Okay, let's go. Where? Shikamaru didn't answer, but just turned around and waved his hand. Come on, I'll show you something. Well. Okay, without hesitation Naruto quickly caught up with Shikamaru and the two slowly began to leave the range. Well. What do you think? Shikamaru asked calmly without taking his hands out of his pockets. He and Naruto quickly arrived at the center of the village, a small residence. More precisely, small by the standards of other Konoha residences. It was almost a mansion, with 2 floors, a small courtyard, and at the same time quite well groomed. An ordinary-looking house with light walls and dark red tiles, and a small balcony. In general, this was the very house of the fourth Hokage and Kushina Uzumaki, Naruto's parents. Shikamaru decided to show him, and not the one behind the barrier at the edge of the village, since it was the best option for Naruto. The boy was here for the first time, or rather, he was looking at this house with such interest for the first time. Naruto frowned. Nice house, but why did we come here? Shikamaru sighed and shook his head. Oh, Naruto. I agree, my mistake, I should have explained everything at once. Well, in short, this is the home of some of your relatives. I would not advise you to ask others about him, as you may have already noticed he does not have an owner, and several signal Fuin seals are installed around the perimeter. A relative. The guy completely ignored everything that he said to Shikamaru, the only thing he caught were the words about relatives. But Shikamaru did not even have time to say a word as Naruto ran to the house. Yes, yours. I also missed that. Slapping his forehead, Shikamaru quickly moved and stood right in the path of Naruto. Stop. The blonde braked sharply and asked in surprise. What? Shikamaru sighed. Damn, did you hear me at all? As I said, the house is under signal seals. If you go there, they will immediately spot you. If this happens, then we will both have major problems. I have for sure, Shikamaru added to his mind, but he didn't say anything else out loud. Naruto hovered slightly and then asked in displeasure. And what to do? If this really is my relative's house, then why can't I go there? Shikamaru walked over to Naruto and quietly said. Because your relatives were not ordinary shinobi. Have you forgotten how everyone in the village looks at you? It's not just that. If you want to know about your parents and your clan, then you should first start listening to me and not be stupid. If you and I are spotted for this case, then we will not turn around. Slapping Naruto on the shoulder, Shikamaru said. You are still too weak to go through the signal seals, and you are too weak for me to tell you anything else. It will only make you worse if I say something else, so. Before Shikamaru finished speaking, Naruto interrupted him. I'm not weak. I will become Hokage. I cannot be weak. Well, yes. Shikamaru shook his head. All I can say now is the name of your mother, but remember, you don't even have to say this name out loud, and even more so ask someone about her. Am I making myself clear? Naruto's eyes sparkled sharply and he quickly nodded. Yes, yes, yes. I promise. I swear. Ha, that's good. Your mother's name was. Leaning slightly towards Naruto's ear, Shikamaru said softly, Kushina Uzumaki. Kushina. Naruto spoke the name quietly but clearly, and then smiled warmly. Shikamaru chuckled. I'm glad you're happy, but that's all you can find out for now. As soon as you become stronger, I will ask you to do something for me. It will also be related to your clan. In return, I will share more information, maybe say your father's name. Yes. True. Don't shout. Shikamaru covered the blonde's mouth with his hand. Be like a normal ninja and be calm. Naruto nodded quickly, causing Shikamaru to finally open his mouth. Okay, let's go. I'll show you a few tricks and give you an assignment for the first time. If you fulfill it, then we will proceed further. Aha! At the same moment, Shikamaru noticed a shadow behind a distant tree out of the corner of his eye. It was a fleeting movement, so it was hard to tell what happened. Still, the guy simply could not take and detect Anew or an experienced Jonin at the moment. but if he was not accurate, then it may well be. Still, he was a difficult child, and the one who was following Naruto could not take into account this, and the fact that it was Naruto who was being followed. Shikamaru had no doubts at all. If Hiruzen simply left the Jinchuriki unattended, that would be as stupid as possible. I spoke quietly enough, I doubt he heard everything. Unless, of course, this is an Uchiha with a Sharingan who can read everything I said. Then it will be bad. Well, the fact that I brought Naruto here is already unusual. The third one can ask questions. Okay, I was already expecting this when I contacted the kid. If anything, I'll find an excuse. I will say that I spotted the Kyuubi chakra thanks to Sharingan, then I will move on to the past bearer of the Jinchuriki Kushina, and the Uzumaki surname will be a good help. Actually, you don't need to be a genius to draw a parallel and come to Minato and the truth about the boy's parents. I am Nara, damn it. Grinning at Shikamaru without worrying about problems and being followed, he led Naruto to a nearby training ground. That evening, after Shikamaru and Naruto finished their grueling workout. Very exhausting for Naruto, a man in a cat mask escorted the young Jinchuriki to his apartment, and then quickly moved from a tree branch to the roof. There was already another member of the anew. In physique it was a girl with a katana on her back. Her long purple hair fluttered in the wind. On the face of the girl was the usual porcelain mask for anew. In appearance it resembled the face of a cat. With a short nod to the girl, the man quickly disappeared. The girl, following his gaze, quickly turned away and moved to the same tree where her colleague had recently sat. It was from this tree that Naruto's room was perfectly visible. At the same time, having surrendered his post, the masked man quickly arrived at the Hokage's office. He usually didn't do that, yet the young Jinchuriki very rarely did anything worthy of the Hokage's attention. Of course, there were occasional skirmishes with some of the disgruntled villagers gaining courage, but often they fainted under strange circumstances, so Naruto was rarely in serious danger. And for often he was simply bypassed by everyone, not even wanting to talk to him. But something strange happened that day that Korue had to tell the Hokage about. His job was very simple: protection and surveillance. So, noticing the strangeness, the ninja hastened to report. After finishing his report to the Hokage, the Shinobi began to quietly await a response and further instructions. Hiruzen, for the entire time of the one-sided conversation, did not budge, calmly filling the scroll. When Korue finished his report, the old man put the parchment aside and nodded thoughtfully. This is quite interesting. Glancing at the still kneeling man, Hiruzen nodded. This important information from Korue, let it stay between us as long as you can be free. Yes, Hokage-sama. After bowing quickly, the man immediately disappeared. Hiruzen leaned back in his chair and thoughtfully lit his pipe. Breathing out the smoke, the old man muttered. What an interesting young man, what are you up to? We should definitely get acquainted. Shikamaru brushed aside the memories as he moved closer and closer to Naruto. The blonde still did not notice him, as his head was lowered, and he tried not to look around at all. Although, this time, the expression on the young Jinchuriki's face was different from usual, and his hands and feet were covered with many abrasions. This, of course, did not hide from Shikamaru's gaze, making him smile with satisfaction. Still, Naruto deserved some respect. His perseverance and desire to achieve the goal, when the path was quite understandable, it pleased. If Naruto had been told that becoming Hokage could only be practiced daily to exhaustion, he probably would have done so. But, unfortunately, the guy could only dream and shout about it at every corner, not knowing how to act and achieve the desired and unclear goal. Shikamaru gave Naruto a rather difficult task for a simple child. Besides, he did not explain anything at all, except for the basics. Therefore, Naruto tried to climb the tree with his chakra almost every day to exhaustion. After 2 months, he was finally able to stand in a tree, which was a huge achievement for a 6-year-old. It was for ordinary genin that this lesson was given relatively quickly, because they more or less possessed chakra and could already use weak ninjutsu. But for Naruto, who was not familiar with chakra at all, it was not easy. Stubborn training did not press the result for a very long time. The guy generally began to suspect that it was almost impossible. But then everything worked out. Now he quite calmly climbed a tree and could just stand upside down on a branch without any difficulties. True, this did not particularly please him. Then an even more difficult level went, walking on water. This was all very sad. Therefore, for the last week, Naruto has been walking around quite tense and a little depressed. He was impatient to find out his father's name, but as luck would have it, so far nothing has worked, except to constantly wet his clothes. While there were pluses, Naruto could now hold his breath longer underwater. True, comforting himself with this, he was even more upset. The guy did not even notice how he almost crashed into someone. Only at the last moment, Naruto instinctively dodged, which even surprised Shikamaru a little, and then looked up sharply. At first, the guy was surprised, and then he sighed. "Oh, it's you, Shikamaru. Ha! What are you? So not happy to see me?" "No, but..." Naruto sighed. "It's okay, it's just very difficult." Shikamaru shrugged. "How do you want? All strong Shinobi train. Plus, walking on water and trees is the backbone of the basics. Have you already learned?" Naturally Shikamaru grinned. He remembered very well how difficult it was, almost 2 months of continuous falls. Therefore, he fully understood Naruto and knew well what it was like to fall from a height. Fortunately, he acquired pedigrees that helped in control, which significantly reduced the difficulty of training. Therefore, Shikamaru handled it relatively quickly. Of course, it was still a long time for genin. But it should be borne in mind that the older the Shinobi is, the better control is given to him and such training. Although a lot depends on talent. Realizing Naruto's condition, Shikamaru decided to cheer the guy up. Even Kji has already learned, although water was difficult for him. If you have any difficulties, then ask him for advice. You can do it, I'm sure. Naruto nodded. Okay, thanks Shikamaru. Don't thank me, you do it for yourself. Later I will fulfill part of the agreement, so do your best. Shikamaru waved goodbye to Naruto and walked slowly onto the Hokage's residence. But, similar, this day was doomed to meetings. So 10 minutes later, when the guy was already approaching the academy, another unplanned meeting happened. Sensing a strange movement, Shikamaru suddenly stopped and looked around, and then chuckled. Come out, I can smell your scent. Smell. Suddenly a blonde girl with a surprised face came out from behind a tree. What else is this smell? Shikamaru grinned and breathed in deeply. This smell, amazing and unique, girls smell so wonderful, did you know? What? You, just. Is this another dirty joke? No, Shikamaru shrugged. I'm quite serious. My nose is no worse than Inuzuka's, so my nose can do a lot. Shikamaru's odd grin made Avi feel uncomfortable again. Every time she met this boy, she was nervous, because sometimes his questions and actions were just too strange. He did not behave at all like an ordinary child, but like an experienced old man who knows a lot of ways to find loopholes in words and make a girl blush. Sometimes Avi couldn't even answer him. On the contrary, if she tried, it only made her worse. So the girl did not continue this topic and came closer to the guy. "Listen, I wanted to talk." "Yes." Shikamaru finally turned and took off his jacket, then stood in a stance and said seriously, "Then we will fight, and then we will discuss." Avi smiled without expecting herself and stood up. "Then I'll start." As soon as Shikamaru nodded, the blonde instantly took off. This time, Shikamaru was already much stronger than in the past during their first battles, although his body ached slightly after recent training with Guy, but in recent months Shikamaru has pulled up very much into jutsu. Thanks to Avi, of course. Even Raizeenn didn't give Shikamaru as much experience as this girl. He naturally didn't like that their training was over. Yet she was an incredibly beautiful girl. But he also realized that he was still a child and there was not much point in this yet. He got the experience he needed and he could finish. If everything is left that way, and continue, everything can turn into something too strange. But, once again facing Avi in battle, Shikamaru began to regret a little about his past decision. It might not have been so bad to continue. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Also make sure you tell me your recommendation in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.